Hey everyone, it's Colin. How's it going? In every hobby, there's always going to be a certain group of people who tend to take things just a bit too seriously. And in technology, there is perhaps no more controversial group than audiophiles. So this time I am joined by a special guest. He's been on the podcast before, Johnny Hemberger from Geek Therapy Radio, and he is fortunate enough to have an actual real radio show. Johnny, how's it going?
I'm doing good, man. You know what I'm realizing is that no matter even if I have a real radio show, it's hard to build up a channel, and that's a good segue, like a YouTube channel. And that's a good segue to say congratulations on 100,000 subs, Colin.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Yeah, so, that whole thing's kind of blowing my mind, really.
I know, because I was subscribed, I think it was around 40,000, 30,000, maybe less than that. I found your channel.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, so I just really like your content. I know I'm speaking for a lot of people out there, obviously, because your channel keeps growing. So, again, congratulations.
Well, thank you. So, obviously, it's always fun to have you on the show and to talk with you. I've been on your show a couple times before, too. But the other thing that's really beneficial to having you on this one is the subject matter.
Yeah.
Because not only are you a fellow geek, but you are a professional audio engineer. That's kind of the cool thing about your deal is you've got a radio show because you work at a radio station. So you've got that technical background. I've got a decent amount of technical background when it comes to pro audio as well, but I've never done it as a day job. So I could tackle this topic and tell people, how it generally is, but it lends a bit of extra credence to have a true professional be able to say, look, this is what I deal with day in, day out. This is what I went to school for, that kind of stuff. And of course, because you live it every day, you've seen a wider spectrum of all of this. That was a horrible joke, spectrum, but audio joke. But
20 to 20K, brother.
Right. I mean, there's a big difference between being a pro and seeing, the whole gamut of it and being perhaps just an enthusiast.
Yeah.
So I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation, kind of just tackling and unpacking the concept of audiophiles and maybe where it comes from and how far it's gone.
Right.
And a lot of perhaps the myths, or I don't know how to describe it, like the way that audiophiles want to believe music production to be like, perhaps to justify the purchases that they've made or want to make versus the realities of what audio production actually is, right?
Yes, 100. You are 100% right. There's a whole lot of, and I'll just say, to be an audiophile, you do not need the prerequisite of being an audio engineer. And as a matter of fact, I think a whole lot of audio engineers are probably going to agree with a lot of what we're saying here. It's when you get to the couch warrior audiophiles that you get the real heat. And there's nothing wrong with being an audiophile. There's nothing wrong with being a self-confessed audiophile or an armchair audiophile. There's nothing wrong with that because it means you're really passionate about music and about audio and geeking out about that kind of stuff. It's a really, really great hobby. But you're right, it's a super controversial subject, and I think when we get into it here, people are going to learn a lot, and again, take it with a grain of salt, because first things first, in audiophilia, everybody's ears are different, and they change throughout your entire life. You do not hear the same, the spectrum of what you hear is different from birth to death. So just take that with a grain of salt. Everyone's ears are different. Just because someone says, oh, this sounds great, doesn't mean it's going to sound great to somebody else. So, again, I encourage your viewers to comment below, as I'm sure you will also, to tell us what their experience with with being audiophiles is, what they think. Maybe they have some information that we might not cover here or something that we might miss. And by all means, let us know. Let's share some knowledge there in the comments section.
Yeah, and I think it perhaps is also worth maybe briefly touching on the definition of audiophile, because it's not set in stone, right?
No.
And I learned this, speaking of comments, from a podcast I did a few months back where I kind of tackled the topic of bows and what they do and how they work. And I tried to present that as neutrally as I could to try and stay fact-based, because I understand what they do with their products. Some of my pro audio experience is with Bose. Of course, it's with other companies as well. Mm-hmm. But I got a lot of people down in the comments, some of them saying, inferring that Bose is an audiophile product, and other people who describe themselves as audiophiles saying there is no way that Bose is an audiophile product. So I think it's really interesting, the spread of what people would consider that term to mean. It kind of goes anywhere from someone who's just interested in getting quality sound, however they, define quality sound, out to people who are so passionate about it that they are looking for pretty much the unattainable, right? Yeah. They're willing to spend ridiculous amounts of money. Ridiculous in the context of, what most people would consider, a reasonable amount, but to them, it's the pursuit of perfection. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of what drives maybe the controversy behind audiophiles is no one's been able to establish, like, this is really exactly what it means. Like, this is where you go from being an enthusiast to an audiophile.
Right.
It's getting bent and twisted around. And I think it's even changed in relatively recent times as the way we've listened to music has changed. You would think that back when, like, a regular just, home stereo with a receiver and two speakers was normal, the audiophiles are the people going out buying these super expensive gear. I can see people now that, like, Bluetooth speakers and headphones are the norm for listening to music. Anyone just going out and building a 2-channel system would be considered an audiophile, despite the fact that maybe the receiver was $100 or whatever.
Yeah. And you know what's funny? See, I used to absolutely despise Bluetooth audio, and I guarantee you there's a lot of people watching this video right now who despise Bluetooth audio. Mm-hmm. I was like that up until fairly recently. Bluetooth audio has gotten it, and it depends on, the device you're listening to the Bluetooth audio with, but the bandwidth for Bluetooth, what were we up to right now? 5.0 on Bluetooth?
Yeah, Bluetooth 5 is, I believe, the latest standard.
There are all sorts of different codecs now of Bluetooth audio. You can get absolutely stunning sounding audio over Bluetooth. Would I personally prefer to listen to something over Bluetooth or some, short length gold-plated cables, which also doesn't matter, wired or Bluetooth? I would prefer, high fidelity over wired. But man, I just got, this is not an ad for Sony at all, but I got a new pair of Sony cans, the 1000 XMs or MXs or whatever.
Are those the noise canceling ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sony has been going nuts lately with, like, really upping the game.
Yes. And you know what's crazy is listening to those, and I hate to admit this, but at the same time, it blows me away. Those headphones sound, I'm going to use the word exquisite, no matter how you're listening to it, but it's almost like they sound even better over Bluetooth, high bitrate Bluetooth, with the noise canceling on. It's like sorcery. What the hell happened to the airplane noise or the crowd noise, and you can hear, depending on the quality of the audiophile and the mixing, and I'm sure we'll get into all that, but they sound amazing. So my point is, the Bluetooth hate is sort of unfounded now. Bluetooth audio has gotten so good in the past couple years that I'm perfectly happy listening to my Sonys with noise canceling on over Bluetooth from my smartphone. It's marvelous. And if you would have told me it would have been this way, like if you would have told me 5 years ago, man, Bluetooth is going to blow your mind in 2018, I'd be like, you are high, get out of here. There's no way Bluetooth is going to be that good, but it is now.
Oh yeah, but the funny thing though is despite how good you can demonstrate Bluetooth audio to be, there's always going to be some percentage of people who are going to philosophically have a problem with it because it's either still compressed audio, and we should clarify, because there will be another topic I'm sure we'll get into in the podcast that also refers to the term compression. So we should say digital compression.
Yes.
And if you ever got to a point where it's like, no, it's lossless. You know, if we ever got to lossless Bluetooth audio, then they would be like, well, the problem is it's digital. They'd always pull out the trump card of it's digital.
Dude, and they'll say, well, then they'll start saying, you know, if we have lossless over Bluetooth, you know, full 24-bit, 192 kilohertz, then they'll say, well, it's only 24-bit and it's only 192.
Yeah, 24, 192. Never mind the fact, and I'm sure I'm going to start getting people riled up now. I mean, I might as well just accept the fact that I'm just going to get people riled up with this one.
There's going to be dislikes on this one.
I'm going to try and stay neutral, but like, I'm pretty sure the science has more or less proven that it's kind of pointless to go past 16, 44.1.
Yeah,
because the whole Shannon Nyquist thing, like,
can we let's touch on that for a second and kind of explain what it is. 16-bit is just the bit rate of the information that it was for CDs originally, 16-bit CDs, 44.1 kilohertz. The important thing is there. Well, yes, the 16-bit, because 16-bit, I will concede absolutely that 16-bit audio sounds better than 8-bit. If you listen to something with an 8 at the bit rate of 8 bits or whatever, you can tell that there's a massive sacrifice in sound quality. But once you get to 16-bit and once you get to 44.1, which you divide by 2 is basically 22,000 hertz. The human ear hears between 20 hertz and 22,000 hertz. So that 16-bit bit rate with the 44.1 kilohertz, that is perfectly within the spectrum. And the reason, what I'm getting to with this is how good something sounds, as far as claiming to be an audiophile, how good something sounds boils 100% down to how it was mixed, how the material was mixed, and how the material was mastered. A lot of people claim, and I hope I'm not pushing the ball too far forward here, but a lot of people claim that, you know, records. Oh my goodness, Colin, get ready for the downvote button on here.
But it's all engagement.
But that vinyl records sound much better than CDs because it's analog, because it's a pure it's a pure sound wave being pressed to vinyl. That is true. For instance, it's yes and no, actually.
Well, okay, so I'm interested to hear as to how you're going to say it's true. Now, I'm going to say I partially agree that it's true, but there are certain conditions under which it's only true. But you go ahead, because I'm curious if we're thinking on the same wavelength here, or if you've got another idea that I hadn't thought of.
Okay. The reason why records, quote unquote, sound better is twofold. One, and this is subjective, the analog nature of record adds a complementary warmth to music. That's completely subjective. I do agree with that personally with my ears. Mm-hmm. The real reason that vinyl, quote unquote, sounds better sometimes than CDs is that it's a completely different mixing and mastering process before putting it down to vinyl. By nature, to record a vinyl record, you cannot have 90-degree angles in your sound waves, meaning you can't have it compressed, audio compressed and limited to right at 0 dBs brick-walled to create 90-degree angles in the sound waves, because when you press it to vinyl, a needle can't follow a track that goes 90 degrees at that perfect right angle. Mm-hmm. So when people mix and master to vinyl, it is naturally mixed much more dynamically, meaning that there's nice peaks and nice valleys, nice round peaks and round valleys in all the audio, so everything sounds nice and separated and dynamic, and you can hear every instrument on the soundstage as it was originally recorded. Now, people will say that vinyl sounds better than the CDs because usually when with CDs, you can smash that crap. They are victims of the loudness war. That's a massive buzzword.
Yeah, and this is where we're getting to the other usage of the term compression, which it used to be like you'd be an audio guy talking about compression, and this is what you would talk about. Now that we've got digital audio, there's two forms of compression. So we talked about digital compression, as in like lossy compression, MP3's AAC, but now we're getting into dynamic range compression.
Right. So what you're saying is there's data compression to make an audio file smaller while trying to retain as much of the frequency response as possible. But yes, what I'm getting at here between CDs and MP3s and then vinyl is audio compression, where you're trying to make the soft parts and the loud parts be at a relatively equal volume, and limiting, which makes it so that everything is just as smashed as loud as possible up to that the digital peak of 0 decibels. When you do that, there is no dynamics, aka there's no fidelity left in the audio. So when you're mixing to vinyl, everything's nice and peaky and dynamic, and everything is spaced out just right. It's a different process that the recording engineers, the audio engineers, are doing from CDs to vinyl. John Mayer is anal about how things go to vinyl. When you buy a John Mayer album, there are 2 separate mixes. When you buy the vinyl, it's the mix that is for vinyl. When you buy the CD or download the MP3, that's the mix that is designed for an MP3. So a lot of other artists and people who say vinyls sound like crap, they're remembering their grandpa's old scratched up vinyls from the 50s that are just that, they're dirty and scratched.
Yeah.
2, they're thinking of possibly, because I've heard this over and over with my own collection. I'll go out to buy a certain album on vinyl. I'll buy it because it's like cheap. And I don't want to admit this, but for an example, there's a band called All Time Low, which their music is super loud and it's like pop punky. I don't even want to admit that I've listened to that because I really don't. Not anymore. But so the MP3 and the CD is super loud and everything, that's fine, and it's smashed up to 0 decibels, which for rock music is acceptable. It's okay.
It can be acceptable.
Can be. Versus they took that same smashed, obliterated, peaked out version that they put on the CDs and MP3s, and they just put it down on the vinyl.
Right.
So when you put that vinyl on the turntable, it sounds like someone has a distortion pedal on everything.
Yeah,
like
it sounds even worse than the CD. All right, so you were actually heading pretty much in the same direction that I was. In that, yeah, absolutely, like the new release vinyl, because of this whole vinyl resurgence that we've been going through, a lot of it is reissues of stuff that came out during like the 90s and 2000s when vinyl was pretty much dead.
Yeah.
That never saw an original vinyl release. And all of that music was recorded digitally.
Yep.
Because digital recording revolutionized the way albums were produced starting around the 80s.
Yeah.
It saved tremendous cost and gave tons of flexibility, of course. And they never really went back and remastered a lot of that stuff. Maybe it was albums that they just wanted to get a quick release out for, or it was a smaller artist and they don't have the money to send the album back through a full remix and mastering process, going back to the original, individual instrument tracks. And they just took the original 2-track master that went out to the CD pressing plant and just, cut a vinyl master off of that.
Right.
But the other part that I was going as to, when some people say that vinyl sounds better than CDs, it's actually a lot of the albums from like the early 80s when CDs were brand new. Those CDs were still like those albums were being recorded analog. And because CDs were so new, vinyl was really the target for release. That was the predominant format at the time. So you're going through this vinyl mastering process, knowing that at the beginning, that's what the album's going to come out on. And then when CDs started coming on the scene, they weren't sure whether they were going to really take off all that quickly or not. I mean, with hindsight being what it is, of course, CDs were absolutely just probably the biggest advent in consumer audio ever.
Yeah,
but
I'd agree.
they would take those vinyl masters and just put them on CD. They would do pretty much the opposite process of what we're seeing with vinyl releases now, and the CDs sounded horrible.
Right. Right. There's what I was going to say also earlier, more to my point, to our point here, is if you take a wonderfully mixed and beautifully mastered song or album, and you put that they're mixing it for vinyl, they're mixing it nice with all the dynamics still intact. If you listen to that same recording on a vinyl versus a CD, the CD is going to blow the vinyl out of the water with the clarity. If you take the same vinyl
clarity
mix,
and self noise. Absolutely.
Exactly. The noise floor for I think CDs is down at negative 96, which might as well just
it's nothing.
Be non-existent.
It's just nothing.
The noise floor for a vinyl, I think at best, like, and this is for the viewers to comment below. I think the noise floor is around negative 70 or 60.
Well, and it's also going to depend largely on your equipment. I mean, you look at a CD player and there's going to be some differences there, but it's all built around a reference standard. Mm-hmm. There was this codified standard as to exactly how CDs work and how they're played back. And all the manufacturers took that standard and went with it. And so you ended up with a whole bunch of CD players that have fewer differences between them in terms of their performance.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that there's no difference between them, because obviously, a $10 portable CD player that you bought at the grocery store is not going to have as good of a DAC in it as a really high-end player from, say, the early 90s. Yes. When CDs were really, that was it. That's pretty much the only thing you could buy music on. There's definitely some differences there, but there's fewer differences between CD players than there are between turntables by far. Yeah. And even just the type of turntable is going to make a difference in noise, whether it's belt drive or direct drive, and what kind of cartridge you're using, and and all this kind of stuff. And I guess that's a great lead into, the other thing about audiophiles is, they're discerning about how the medium on which they listen to music. Mm-hmm. But there's also probably their claim to fame or infamy or whatever you want to call it is just this passion for high-end gear. Yeah. And going down that rabbit hole. And it's it's comical. And I think that's where audiophiles maybe get a bad rap. I mean, in some ways I kind of identify as an audiophile in that. Me too. Yeah, in that kind of, lower end of the spectrum type of regard, where it's like, I just want the best bang for the buck. I'm not willing to listen to music on the earbuds that came in the box with my smartphone. I want something a bit better than that. Yeah. But I'm not going to go and continually chase better and better and better things. Yeah. Thinking that I'm ultimately going to, achieve perfection. Maybe it's just because I've come to peace with the fact that my hearing is what it is, and that with what my hearing is, a certain level of equipment isn't really gonna, do any better.
We're common sense audiophiles.
Right. And I like to think that's where the majority of people who consider themselves audiophiles to be, because that seems like that's kind of the bulk of the market these days. Yeah. I mean, we're seeing more and more headphones, for example, like in that $200 to $300 range, and more people getting on board with headphones in that range. There are people who will go out and drop thousands of dollars on very esoteric headphones, but it seems like that middle ground is kind of where the bulk of audiophiles, not just the sweet spot in terms of value, but where like the most people are getting into it. because of how much music we have available. People, I think, are getting more and more interested into getting better quality audio, but I think they're realizing, do you really want to throw thousands of dollars worth of equipment after music you're listening at on Spotify?
Yeah.
And the limitations in that. But it's still, I think, amusing to some. And I'll be honest, to me as well, just the lengths that some audiophiles go to buy equipment to try to achieve that perfection. And then, as we were kind of talking about earlier on, the justifications that they come up with, as to why they needed to buy that equipment and their perception as to how audio is recorded and mixed and mastered, like cables, is kind of probably the most famous of things that people like to make fun of audiophiles about, where, you'll have audiophiles spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars just on cables, interconnects. Like $1,000 speaker cables, 10-foot speaker cables, and all this marketing, terminology about, how this cable will improve the quality of the sound. And they'll even go so far as to say, it'll make, this kind of difference in the high end, and, the low end will sound more robust, and this other, these other attributes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, so, you've got people dropping this kind of money on cables, including power cables.
Oh yeah.
Which kills me, which absolutely, like, you're taking a power cable between your amplifier and the wall socket that costs hundreds of dollars. What do you think is on the other side of that wall socket?
It's
like $10 worth of $10 worth of Romex from Home Depot. I mean, you know.
And kind of to that point, power is important. Now, I would say it would be a good idea if you are a true audiophile, because it doesn't cost, it's not that expensive to take care of this, but right now I'm in an apartment, and usually the electricity in an apartment is trash. You can think of it like dirty water. Well,
electricity everywhere is trash because it's shared. I mean, everyone's on the same grid.
Right, and there's 100 different materials that the electricity is running through. So I do think, as far as if you're going to claim to be an audiophile, it is a good idea, because it doesn't cost that much, to put a power conditioner in between your wall and your amplifier. Give that amplifier nice, clean power, and your system will A, last longer, and B, actually, the noise floor will be lower once you have eliminated all the 60 hertz hum, and the power's not, dipping and peaking around 110 volts if we were in North America, 110 to like 130. If you just give it a nice, clean 120 volts, just nice pure sine wave going into your audio stuff, yes, it will sound better, and your stuff will sound better, and that's more than surge protection. It will be surge protected, but if you don't have a surge protector between your audio setup and your wall.
If you don't have a surge protector between any sort of electronic, expensive electronic device in the wall, I mean, I've got a surge protector on my refrigerator, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. To back to where we're talking about kind of people buying this expensive gear. I play music. You can't see it in the shot here, but I've got some guitars hanging next to me. And my favorite guitar right now that I have, my favorite acoustic, is this Epiphone Hummingbird. Now, if you are a musician, then you know this very well. This Epiphone Hummingbird costs maybe $400. I think it was on sale. It's right. It's a $400 or $500 guitar, between $300 and $500. And you know what? The reality, the Big Brother Gibson Hummingbird costs, well over $1,000, $2,000 or $3,000 maybe. It's literally thousands of dollars. But here, the difference between sound quality between this $400 Hummingbird and the Gibson Hummingbird, you have to ask yourself, it's 99% there as far as tone quality. So you have to ask yourself, is that going that extra 1% worth 4 extra digits to the device? And I think a lot of audiophiles, I don't want to say fall for this, but justify this. They'll buy a a $2,000 turntable or something, and then a $3,000 cartridge, because yes, that little needle cartridge in your turntable, you can spend up to and over $5,000.
Oh yeah.
Just for that needle. I think it's made with it's whittled down from one of Jesus's teeth or something like that.
They go to the jeweler and be like, "What's the nicest diamond you got?"
Exactly. So.
What kind of ring do you want to put in? No. I'm not putting the diamond in a ring.
You don't understand. It's going to my turntable. So
I only craft styli from the most exquisite acoustic diamonds.
Yes. So that's the point. Like, okay, if you go to Elton John's house and he has bought a $500,000 turntable with a $20,000 cartridge in it, and he puts on his latest album, and he's like, listen to this, listen how clear it sounds. Mm-hmm. If you put that same album on a $500 turntable going through $500 speakers in a decent, let's say like a $2,000 setup through and through versus a $520,000 setup, the average person, I don't care if this video gets slammed with
well, you don't care. Down. It's not your video.
It's not my channel. It's not my channel. So
you can do whatever you want, and I am holding the bag.
If the average layperson goes into that setup and A and B's it between a $600,000 setup and a $2,000 setup, and is like, yeah, the $500,000 one is like blows the $2,000 out of the water. No, the average person isn't going to tell the difference between something that's high end and then something that's just Elton John fabulous. Right. They're not going to be able to they're not going to be able to hear that 1% difference between something that's great and something that's greater. Now, a lot of audiophiles, because I think we're all like this to some degree, even if you're not an audiophile, if you build gaming PCs, this is a good example. I don't necessarily have an interest in the new RTX, 2000 series cards when my GTX 980 couple generations is running just fine. But it irks me that I don't have the latest and greatest.
Yeah. I think kind of to come full circle on this whole thing, I personally don't have a problem with anyone in any part of that audiophile spectrum.
Yeah. No.
For the most part, simply because, you know what, if you want to go after the super expensive, super rare, super high quality stuff, it's your money,
And you have the means, yes.
Go for it. Yeah. If that's what makes you happy, if that's your thing, okay, cool, go nuts. Yeah. Where I start to have problems is when one, elitism starts to set in, and suddenly you think everyone underneath you, their stuff is garbage, and they aren't achieving happiness like you have. Right. And then two, when bunk science and marketing BS get involved to justify those kinds of costs. And that's, I think, really kind of the thing that keeps Audiophiles controversial, is because in all of these other technical realms, like you were talking about video cards, I mean, there are going to be some people who will argue, buying the latest and greatest video card isn't worth it. Buying a previous gen where the prices have dropped and everything, that's going to be the best value and all that. You can quantify all of that. You can benchmark all of those video cards in the same way and get firm concrete numbers and demonstrate and measure, look, this card is better than this other card. Look at the prices, look at the performance, dollars per clock, or however else you want to measure, whatever benchmark you're using per frame rate, or number of polygons it can render, or whatever, or if you're doing crypto mining, how much money it can make, or anything.
You can measure it.
You can come up with that. This card is you can say this card's a better value than the other one because you get more for your money out of it. With audiophiles, because like you said, everyone hears differently. And because you can't measure human perception and how our brains process music and sound and all of that. All of that pseudoscience and marketing BS will continue because you could sit there and say, no, that's crap. Like, using this weird compound in your speaker wires, or, manufacturing the stylus in this way, which makes it cost way more money, but supposedly makes it sound better. That's bunk. You could say that, but then they can come back to you and say, well, prove it. Yeah. To me, it sounds better. Yeah. And then how are you supposed to get into their head and prove whether they're right or not? So
yeah. That's a perfect segue into. I'll send you. I saw a study, and I'll send you the link. I'll find the study. They actually took self-confessed audiophiles and they played they A/B'd them the same material, played through the same relatively high-end system. They played basically MP3s and lossless 24-bit 96K waves or 192, just the highest fidelity audio possible, versus the highest quality and varying qualities of MP3s, 16-bit MP3s. And what they found was, and again, I'll send you the link to this study, all self-confessed audiophiles, most of them could not hear the difference, and even said in some cases that the MP3 sounded better than the lossless pure audiophile. The same material A/B'd between MP3 and lossless audio. Most of the time, in most of the cases, the self-confessed audiophiles could not hear a difference, and even said that the MP3 version of it sounded better in a blind test. So that's just data. That's just facts. And I'm not saying that so that you go throw your $5,000 speakers in the trash. Don't do that. Give them to me. Or me or Colin, something like that. I'll take them. But you're right. It comes down to human ears, everyone's individual human ears. And there's a whole lot of, like you were saying, there's a whole lot of snake oil. There's a whole lot of hype that they add to things to price these things really expensive to try to profit from this audiophile buzzword. And again, the fact is that even most self-confessed audiophiles could not hear the difference between a crappy MP3 and a lossless audiophile. That's just the truth. And I know there's a lot of people in the comments right now probably saying, I can. Yeah. Well, yes, some of you probably can. Everybody, even the layperson, can hear the difference between a 128 kilohertz MP3 and a 320 kilohertz MP3 at the bit rate, kilobits per second MP3. And I'm gonna ruin things for a lot of people here. So maybe skip ahead 30 seconds so you don't hear what I'm about to hear, because what I'm about to tell you, you can forever not unhear. The way you can hear the difference between fidelity of a low bitrate MP3 and a high bitrate MP3 is listen to the hi-hats in the music. Even the layperson, if they're focusing on the hi-hats of a drum, will hear that digitization, that warble that happens in the upper frequencies where the 128 kilohertz kilobit per second MP3 cuts off, shelves everything above, I think it's like 16,000 hertz or whatever. Those high frequencies are super affected by low bitrate MP3s versus a 320 kilobit per second MP3. I'm sorry, viewers. YouTube does the same thing. That's what's really funny, Colin, is when you watch videos on YouTube about being audiophile stuff, is like, by the time you put it on YouTube, it is going to be absolutely obliterated, destroyed by YouTube's own compression logarithm. So there's a whole lot of a lot of stuff around being an audiophile is hype, and again,
and there's a lot of opinion being pranced around as fact.
Right. Which you're right, which is untrue. And let me just say, having been an audio engineer, I went to audio engineering school in California, and I went to radio, television, and film in college. That's why I got into radio. You don't have to be an audio engineer to get into radio. A radio studio is a little different than a recording studio. But here's some practical things to help your audio game. Some real, actual things that I've listened to with my own ears, and a lot of audiophiles would probably agree with me. Here's some actual technology you can use to get the most out of your audio. Ribbon tweeters sound better than Silk Dome tweeters. If you are listening to a pair of Adams monitors, that's the name of the company, ADAMS, I believe, their claim to fame is that they have ribbon tweeters. The first time I heard ribbon tweeters playing some audio like a snare drum off of some 2-inch 24-track tape, it sounded like the drummer was still there. Like you were in the room with the drummer. That pure high bandwidth analog sound coming off of that 2-inch tape going through some, granted, these are $100,000 pair of, I think they're Genelecs or something like that. They might have been custom made, but they had ribbon tweeters. We A and B them, but between the ribbon tweeters and the other monitors that had Silk Dome tweeters, those ribbon tweeters make those high ends sound so perfect and so natural. So if you're looking for speakers, I personally recommend going for ribbon tweeters. I think there is some truth to the fact that ribbon tweeters make the high end sound more natural. 2, if you're building an audio system, consider buying recording studio monitors. That's what I have set up in my living room here. I have got a set of relatively inexpensive KRK Rocket 5s. Those by no means are very expensive, but I guarantee you they blow an equivalently priced set of Pokes right out of the water. So you don't have to buy the consumer grade stuff. You can actually go to sites like Musician's Friend or go into Guitar Center and buy actual studio monitors, and you're going to get the fidelity, quote unquote, that they hear in the recording studio.
And I should note, and I don't want to go down too deep of a rabbit hole, but
yeah,
I should note that that's not for everyone. Because
no, it's not.
Studio monitors are going to sound way different than consumer or home speakers.
True.
Because studio monitors are meant to reveal different aspects of the music.
Brutal truth in the music.
Yeah. You want the brutal truth. You want, well, and a lot of recording studios will have, as you mentioned, multiple sets of monitors in there. They'll have a set of those studio monitors that are meant to be as flat in terms of frequency response as they can get, to try and be as detailed as they can, but almost to a fault, because you want to get as much detail as you can out of the mix to figure out what you need to fix when you're mixing. But the flip side is the other sets of monitors that the studios will often have actually won't sound that good comparatively.
Correct.
And that's because they're trying to replicate what the average person is going to listen to. The famous Yamaha NS10s. I'm sure most people have seen these. They're iconic, and strangely enough, they don't make them anymore.
Black and white.
Black with the white woofers in them. Those actually don't sound very good.
Yes, they do not.
As studio monitors.
On purpose.
But they don't sound good on purpose, because they're meant to be a representative sample of what the average home consumer speaker is going to sound like, so that you go through your mix and you listen to it on the studio monitors and you fix it up, the way you think is best. And then you flip over to those other monitors, and what will the public actually hear? And I've heard stories of mixing and mastering engineers like taking recordings out to their cars.
Yes.
Or intentionally listening to them on the cheap earbuds that come with phones and that kind of stuff. They'll listen to them on a wide variety of devices to try and massage the audio as best they can in all these different directions so that it sounds as good as they can get it across a wide variety of devices. So
yes,
your point about, you can go out and buy studio monitors. Absolutely. And if you really want to know, what music sounds like in the studio, that's like the best way to do it, but that isn't for everyone. And I've realized that's not for me. I've gone down that road. I've tried it. And the big difference in one word between studio monitors and regular home speakers is fun.
Yeah.
Home speakers are fun. They give you that classic kind of smile to the frequency response. They accentuate the lows and highs just a little bit more. There's a little bit more energy, I guess, that kind of comes across.
Yep.
In home speakers than in studio monitors, but granted, you're often losing detail.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that trade-off as to what are you going for? And, maybe to wrap things up, that's perhaps what audiophiles are ultimately trying to seek, is that perfect balance. They're trying to get as much detail and that studio experience, but also getting the audio to sound the way they want it to sound.
Yes.
At the same time, whether necessarily they realize it or not.
Yes. Real quick to wrap it up also, what you said, herein lies the entire rub of audiophilia. I just said, get some studio monitors. They sound the best. Colin, another self-confessed audiophile, said, no, just get some decent hi-fi speakers. They sound the best to me. And therein lies the rub of audiophilia. Mm-hmm. Now, the difference is I'm not going to beat you over the head. One thing is you're far away from me and I can't reach 1,500 miles away. Yeah. But two, to each their own.
Right.
You know, you said earlier that as long as you're not beating each other up over this or having some superiority complex over this, then it's all fine. I prefer studio monitors in my living room. Colin says that doesn't work for him. We're both very happy and satisfied with our audio setups.
Yep. So with that, Johnny, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast again. You do tackle your own tech topics fairly frequently. How can people find your show?
So if you go into your favorite podcast app, iTunes or Spreaker or iHeartRadio app or anything like that, Pocket Cast is what I use on my Android, and start typing in Geek Therapy Radio with Johnny Hemberger, it'll come up. And you can listen to all that stuff on there. I've got an entire catalog of things titled beautifully, beautiful descriptions. Just go scan through it, see if you find something that looks interesting to you, and listen to it. And I just encourage geeks everywhere. We're all geeks about something, so this is for everybody. Just to treat each other with respect. There's more that we have in common than what divides us. We're trained so much to hate each other over politics, which is ridiculous because we all love Star Wars. So if you believe in that mentality, then Geek Therapy Radio is for you, and I suggest you just look it up in your favorite podcast app, Geek Therapy Radio with Johnny Hemberger.
So there you go, folks. Go hit up Johnny. Go take a listen to his show. It's very entertaining. Highly recommended. And again, Johnny, thanks for hanging out with me this time.
Absolutely, Colin. Thanks for having me on.
All right. So if you're interested in audio-only versions of my podcast, they are available on Patreon for contributions at all levels. They're just plain MP3 downloads, plus there's private RSS feed support. Just throw it into the podcast player of your choice. And they usually show up a few days before they arrive on YouTube. So if you're interested in helping to support the channel, something worth checking out. All right, if you like this one, I would appreciate a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at thisdoesnotcomp. And as always, thanks for watching.